Alright folks, today I am here once again to bring you my thoughts on The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 3 Episode 1. My god am I glad that doesn't have a subtitle like the Book of Carol. Now, as most of you probably already know, I was not a fan of Season 2's story whatsoever, and unfortunately based off this episode, it seems like the stuff I've liked from this show, such as the cinematography and set design, is still on point, but the issues I've had in the past are just as, if not more prominent than they've ever been. If I were to describe this episode in one word, I'd probably say lackluster, as it really didn't deliver on anything beyond getting Carol and Daryl to Spain, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. One of the most intriguing moments from this series came in the Season 2 finale, where the Scots had mentioned the UK was able to lock down the island when the outbreak started and was presumably still functioning today as if society never crumbled. But as we begin this episode, not only do we learn this is no longer true, but the UK is actually worse off than anywhere else we've seen. France has civilians just living in apartments or on farms as if they've adapted to the way of the New World, and Spain is seen to immediately have multiple factions residing around the coast alone. But London is now home to only one man named Julian, who has declared himself the last person alive in England as far as he could tell, which I can't help but find underwhelming. We see there were militarized safe zones in the city, but according to Julian, the dead simply overwhelmed them in time, which does speak to how dangerous the virus is, as even the biggest walls and widest oceans can't protect you from them. Although does give me a feeling of disappointment, as that was a huge lore bomb to just drop and take away. I even made a whole video talking about the story potential of this revelation that is essentially useless now. They tease us at the beginning with the idea of there being no walkers around, but that just turned out to be a result of Julian fixing Big Ben and attracting them to the center of the city daily, which again left me disappointed. It is possible there still could be some sort of civilization in the UK that we just didn't see, but much like France, our time there is done, so any questions we have will pretty much remain lingering, which is an aspect of the series I cannot stand. When it's time to move on, it is time to move on, no matter how many hanging threads there are. But overall, the London section of the episode was short and sweet. Daryl and Carol show up, take shelter, and then meet Julian, who conveniently has a sailboat he's willing to take them to America with. And despite my problems with the lore presented, I once again have to say, my god, these set pieces are beautiful. We only see a couple roads set up within London, but man are the greensmen doing overtime, especially considering they weren't even actually shooting within London during these on-the-ground scenes. My biggest issue with the main show towards the end of its run was the lack of diversity in environments as a cost-saving measure. Even Dead City Season 2 had this issue with Central Park, but Daryl Dixon pulls no stops when it comes to making this world look dead yet alive through overgrowth. Even when they're shooting on a blue screen, the CGI actually looks really solid, which I can't express enough how much I appreciate. I also have to say, I really enjoyed Carol and Daryl's dynamic this episode. Ever since the middle of Season 10, I've occasionally felt a sense of animosity between the two. Even in Season 2, Carol finding Daryl is overshadowed by Daryl's grief over Isabel, but in this episode, we see them care for each other, cover each other's backs, and share excitement over returning home, which I thought worked really well and felt like a return to form for the relationship. I was really annoyed with the setup of Season 2 because you had Carol trying everything in her power to find Daryl, only for Daryl to be completely fine and hanging out with Laurent by choice. But here, their goal is to get home ASAP. Even when Julian is trying to convince them to stay, they just outright refuse, which I feel like wouldn't have been the case if we were still dealing with the French characters. And don't you worry, I'm getting to the Julian thing soon. Now, as the three begin their journey sailing across the Atlantic, we get a brief flashback scene of Daryl during his teenage years, which didn't really lead to much in the episode, but has me extremely excited for the next few installments, as that is an essential aspect of his character that is very rarely addressed, especially in the modern day. We hardly ever get pre-apocalypse flashbacks, and I've complained about Daryl's lack of depth in recent years extensively. So this is something that absolutely got my attention, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they utilize it in the future. But where there's praise, there's criticism, as I thought the whole crash sequence, or lack thereof, was extremely lazy in both writing and execution. A storm washing them ashore is just not a creative plot point. Sure, it might be realistic, but it was not satisfying, especially considering we cut from Daryl and Carol screaming to the winds about how confident they are in getting back, only to pick up with them beached in Spain. I'm not sure if this was supposed to come off as funny or not, but it did feel like a goofy transition. It's kind of funny because when watching the scene where Julian takes out his spyglass and sees the storm in the distance, I for some reason was expecting to see a large vessel heading straight for them. It was a brief moment, but it put the idea in my head. Imagine if they had been sailing for days and maybe made it through the storm but had a torn up sail, only to see a large vessel heading their way which they'd initially get excited over, only to notice it continuing on course before essentially ramming straight into them. That way you could keep your beached at shore plot point while making it a bit more exciting, or hell, maybe even have the ship pick them up and take them to Spain. It seems like sacrificing people is a theme this season, so who knows, maybe that could have been a cool way to usher Daryl and Carol into the new plot. We've seen large shipping vessels in the show's past, so it's not like it'd be out of nowhere, and it would be one of those things that lets you know there's a lot going on in this world we don't even know about. I don't know, I just find the whole storm washing them ashore thing to be extremely cliche, and even worse, a repeat of what we've already seen. Daryl Dixon Season 1 begins with Daryl washing up on the beach of a foreign country, only to learn where he is by reading a sign he doesn't understand. While Season 3 begins with Daryl and Carol washing up on the beach of a foreign country, only to learn where they are by reading a sign they don't understand. I think this was intended to be a callback or mirror of his arrival in France, but when the thing you're calling back to only happened 12 episodes ago, it feels more like a retread rather than an homage. But as the two come back to consciousness near their wrecked boat, they notice Julian isn't inside, as it turns out he died during the crash and reanimated while somehow wandering to the other side of the beach without eating Carol or Daryl. Ugh, that's all I really have to say. Every single season of these spin-off shows, I've complained about introducing new and interesting characters only to kill them off a handful of episodes later without fulfilling their full potential. But this is by far the worst offender. This character was literally made just to give the two a boat, which is really annoying because we were beginning to learn a lot about him during his short run, only for it to not matter at all. It's funny too because I was thinking I shouldn't get too attached to this character because he'll probably be gone by the end of the season, but I could barely finish that thought before he was already dead, which is starting to really get on my nerves. I'm supposed to give a shit about all these new faces we're about to be introduced to, but how can I when I know they're gonna be gone soon? This isn't just a Daryl Dixon problem, but a spin-off problem in general. How are you gonna keep this franchise alive for years to come if you have no new faces to pass the torch onto? I don't know, that death just really bugged me, as Julian was simply a plot device to get them to the next filming location. But despite that blunder, I have to say I think the initial introduction to Spain was done really well. We're immediately shown a much warmer environment through color grading, which I think looks beautiful. But it's what we see later that first night that really intrigued me, as Daryl and Carol's boat is raided by a tribe-like group wearing the skulls of animals while riding horseback. Oh man, amazing. These guys are cool. Like, really cool, and I think this short scene was a fantastic way to ignite interest in where the story could be going. I actually think this shot of them emerging from the woods may be my favorite from the spin-off so far. It just oozes mystery, fear, and intrigue, which I can't wait to see how they follow it up. But on the flip side, Daryl later on sees a different group of men driving through the forest in a jeep, which does make the country feel more alive, but kind of already takes away that sinister feeling they were building up so well. I don't know, I saw that jeep and immediately thought of another Pavor, which really doesn't interest me. I'm praying these Skull guys are the main antagonists this season, as I don't think I can really handle another New World government acting as a corrupt regime. It's just so played out at this point, so my biggest hope going forward is to simply see something we haven't before. That doesn't sound like much of an ask, but given we've already repeated the whole washing up on a foreign country shore thing, I'm a little nervous to see where this goes. But ending off the episode, we see Daryl and Carol take shelter in an abandoned shack, only for Carol to go missing following Daryl's return from hunting. We do see Carol hearing what sounds like laughter in the distance before taking off, so it's pretty obvious this is how they're gonna come across that benevolent group we see in the trailers. But that is basically the episode. I didn't think it was bad by any means. What I'm seeing feels like a high budget product, but once again, it's the story that has left me feeling underwhelmed. The glossing over of world-changing lore and quick disposal of new characters is just as problematic as it was in the previous seasons. But admittedly, I am finding myself more excited to see where this story takes us than I ever was with the France plotline. I thought it was cool seeing all those iconic landmarks, but Pavor was just kind of a lame antagonist for those seasons. And the stuff I really wanted to see with the variants was essentially watered down to a chase sequence. So here, I'm putting a lot of hope into these Skull Guys to provide an intriguing story that will genuinely keep me engaged. I love their visuals and mysterious nature, so I pray they don't lose that tone going forward. One thing I did really like though was the use of the liquor bottle as a metaphor for their situation getting worse. By the end of the episode, they're stranded with nowhere to go and no way to get home, with the liquor reflecting that as it slowly begins to run out. Daryl even refers to it as the good stuff, which is pretty on the nose, but I like how it never actually fully runs out. As if it's meant to reflect how, despite everything, the two still have each other and will never lose hope. Or, I don't know, maybe I'm just overthinking it. As of now, I am enthusiastic for what's to come, but I haven't been wowed with what I've seen so far. I think there's potential for this to be a really solid season of The Walking Dead, but I also thought that going into both Daryl Dixon and Dead City Season 2 and was left disappointed. If I were to rate this episode, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10, with the cinematography and set design doing most of the heavy lifting. Nothing too offensive beyond the typical issues with this franchise, but nothing that screams The Walking Dead is back either. Regardless of my feelings, I'm extremely curious to hear your thoughts on this episode. Do you agree with my takes, or do you see aspects of this installment in a different light? I haven't looked at any fan reception of this episode yet, so let me know how you felt about it in the comments down below. But that is gonna do it for me today, folks. As always, thank you so much for watching.